class, we spent a fair amount of time sort of sorting out proportions and a little bit of a discussion on anatomy. I'll talk a little bit more about anatomy as we go along. But what I generally tend to do in terms of drawing is I'll light touch on every little principle, come back, do a deeper touch on every single principle, and then start to slowly grow your knowledge that way, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about clothing, right? So there's my drawing there, and kill that reference. Those are lecture notes. Let's kill those lecture notes, right? All right. So call this my base. I'm gonna pop in a new layer. I'm gonna Control G this to group that layer, and I'm gonna double click it and name it costume. I'm gonna take that base layer, and I'm gonna bring that visibility down from that one, or the opacity anyway. And we'll pop in and we'll take a look at what we want to do here, right? So there are a few different things I need to fix in terms of proportions and things like that, but I'll hit that in a second. I'm going to move my tools over to my screen. The stream keeps zooming in. Yowza. Zooming in and out. Oh, okay. That's unusual. I've never heard that before. So I'm not entirely sure. Because it looks to be okay on my broadcast screen. Let me take a look here. It seems to be okay. Has it stopped? A bit concerned. Hopefully it stopped. Zooming in and out. Yeah, I'm... Huh. Doesn't look like it's zooming in and out for me here. I was rapidly zooming in and out to my drawing. Maybe that's what... like I was in here just coming in real quick and doing like in and out, right? Okay, well, I'm going to try to soldier on, right? So that's too dark for me. I'm going to go to something a little bit lighter, right? One of the things I stay away from is complete... Yeah, it's thunderstorm outside right now. One of the things I try to stay away from is complete black and complete white, right? So I think I want to go with slightly lighter color. Oh, I got to be careful. That's too light. Yeah, this should be good, right? So now what I'm doing is I'm just going to... I'm not entirely sure what I'm kind of designing at the moment. Oh, it's saving on me. Hello. I'm just trying to play with shapes. Now, what I want to do is create this idea of a character that is slightly more kind of top heavy, right? So initially I'm thinking, okay, do we want to put in, you know, like, is he wearing some sort of, I don't know, maybe I'll chuck in a shirt, and it doesn't have to be his shirt, it could be an undershirt, right? And then I'll put in some pull lines or something, or this could be, we could go a completely different direction. I'll see. And then I always do this as a reminder that there's a layer of cloth over top that skin, so I'll do this little L-shaped, or this little hockey stick to show that that's kind of going in there. Sometimes what helps me think is just thinking about all the stuff the guy's going to have on his utility belt. Maybe it's like, maybe he's got something sort of huge in the back. Perhaps he's a traveler. Maybe he needs one of these. So I'm just sort of free-forming it right now, right? Notice how I'm the minute I think of it, I'm putting it down, right? So I don't know if it's going to be a cloth kind of thing or not. Maybe. Perhaps he's going to stay bare arms. I don't know. And maybe Yeah, I don't know what I want to do there yet, but I'll put something on top there. And, you know, perhaps he's got, maybe it's tied up. Perhaps he's got a device on there somehow. I don't know. So again, you know, I'm just sort of thinking about various different ideas, right? So I'm going to pop up another thing here, and maybe I might go with something a little bit more kind of sci-fi. Right? The idea is that you want to get these things down super quick. So this would be very much a part of my own kind of ideation process. So if I show up at work and I have a brief to design this guy, this is what I'll do. It's kind of like doodling. Ha 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 ha. Nice, very cool. So it's kind of like doodling, right? So it's just this idea of kind of, you know, just sort of seeing what kind of develops. And then, you know, with something like armor, I start to think about how those pieces would actually sort of fit together. You know, just kind of making it up as I go. So I want to take a step back and talk to you guys a little bit about sort of shape language, right? So let's take a look at the two different things that we've got going on, right? Now, a couple of things that I know straight off the bat with this particular design. I do want this character to be fairly top heavy, right? So that's kind of my primary focus for this design. Did I stop streaming? What happened? Video is off. Do I have drop frames? Let me take a quick look here. I spoke too soon when I said we don't seem to have the same problems as we did earlier this week. Okay. No, it looks like we're back. Sort of. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this tab real quick so I can kill that one, and I can go over to the video producer tab in here. I left the call entirely. Let me try again. Yeah, something happened. Okay, let me see if I can screen share this out again. Whoa, that's really bizarre. Discord just decided to cancel me. Okay, so a few different things that I want to talk about, right, in terms of shape language, right? So again, one of the things that, let's find a different color. So, yeah, again, I'm looking at this sort of shape, right? And you can see that kind of replicated in this design as well, right? So that's sort of what I'm gunning for when I'm looking at the various different shapes. Now, when I start designing something like armor, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, right? And come back to this, right? I start looking for common shapes, right? So you notice that the first thing I did was put this, I don't know, communicator type thing here. And it's very rounded, right? So then the shoulders are quite rounded, right? And then the rib cage here is quite rounded, right? And I contrast that with some angular shapes, but the angular shapes are in the interior, right? So, actually, I should dovetail this with the neckline. Bring those lines together a little bit more this way, right? So I'm looking for these contrasting, where am I going to put my hard lines and hard shapes? Where am I going to put the soft rounded shapes and forms, right? So when I did the belt buckle here, right, I cut a little groove in there, but really I was just taking that and doing it again, right? Just so there's that sense of the same shape replicated in the armor design, right? So this is a really kind of important concept. I will be talking about it quite a bit, and it's this whole idea of shape language and shape continuity. And there are a couple of different reasons for that. There's the visual aesthetics and appeal of having a singular shape sort of replicated inside the design, but there's also making sense of it from a realistic point of view. So if we were to take a look at manufacturing this armor, right, it would probably be in a factory with a lot of vacuum forming molds, and those molds might be soft and round depending on what that factory has for equipment when piecing the armor pieces or creating the armor pieces together, etc., etc. So understanding A, how that costume is put together, and B, how similar shapes help design unity are things to consider when you're roughing stuff out and you're roughing some ideas out, right? So here, with it's a little bit easier when you're dealing with cloth objects to sort of play with more different shapes, right? So for here, what I like to do is I like to try to contrast geometric shapes like the cylinder in the back here and what will eventually be like these cubes and rectangles with a lot of the soft flowing cloth shapes and forms, right? So I might do quite a few of these, right? Just to kind of explore what I want to do with this character. Now, granted, in a studio situation, you will also have, will we have clothing lessons in 3D? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. To a very basic level, but I'll talk a little bit about it, right? So there are a few different ways of simulating cloth, right? There's Ncloth inside of Maya, which I might teach you really briefly in theory. It's the most complicated way of creating 3D clothing, but it gives you a good overview of the technology that drives cloth simulations and what's lying underneath. Then I might teach you guys Marvelous Designer, which is a little bit simpler, and then we'll explore together Blender's cloth simulation brush, which I think is awesome. Okay, so one of the things that I'm going to hopscotch over to now is the face, right? Because I'm not getting a sense of this character as of yet, right? And so even though I did a couple of rough designs, I'm not entirely happy because I don't know if that character would wear those clothes, right? So I need to get a stronger sense of who the character is before I can make kind of decisions on what they're going to wear, you know? Which may seem a bit funny, but it's literally what you have to do. You got to think about your character's personality and think about what it is that they would like to wear. So, you know, I'm going to... Again, I'm following my construction lines, right? So that's quite helpful. I don't know what shape I want to do for the eyes. But here's a tip about eyes. Actually, I'm going to slow this down a little bit and walk you through my process just a little bit, right? So I used to hem and haw over eyes quite a bit, right? You ever see those classic sort of drawing tutorials and manuals that say, okay, well, when you draw the eye, you got to have that upper curve like that with a bell here and things like that. And then you contrast it with one low swoop and then you're like this and, you know, and you're like struggling to get those curves right. And you're just like, oh, you know, it's got to, right? Forget all that. Forget all that, right? Here's how you draw eyes on a character, right? Here's the character's head, right? You're drawing the head shape and then, oh, circles. Right? That's fine because you can go in there later and you can go, all right, I'm going to cut in what I want my lines to do. You know, maybe adjust the nose, right? Something like that. Very, very simple shape, right? Very, very, very simple shape. just to get the character kind of blocked in, right? And that's fine. That's good enough because then you can kind of build your character from there, right? Simple circles, right? So for this one, I'm taking it a little bit further, right? So I'm going to delete that. Oops. Oh, come on. Okay. But in here, with the eyes, I'm doing pretty much the same thing. Just a little bit more almond shaped, right? And in fact, you don't want to draw perfect eyes, actually, because notice how this eye shape is different from that eye shape. It's giving a little bit of expression, like one eye is squintier than the others, right? So freeing yourself up from the mechanics of drawing an eye will allow you to experiment a little bit with facial expression, right? And it's a lot easier. So I want to give this, my guy, a little bit of a bigger nose, right? And then something like that, right? So I might, so I'm gonna come out here and also hit the, I kind of like that. It's very graphic line. You'll occasionally hear me talk about graphic lines, and a graphic line means, okay, I'm not necessarily following the, the divot of the chin. I'm just going to go and do just one singular curve straight down, right? Might not be entirely correct anatomically, but it's graphic. It's a simple line that really kind of works in this particular situation at that side of his head, right? So a little tip about something that I learned about this side of the head. Let me erase this for a sec. Right? I used to draw head shapes, and this might be you guys as well, right? Where I was just like that, right? But I found that just adding a little bit of the mandible, like that, just a little bit of a curve, adds so much more, right? So again, I'm actually getting too tight. I want to stay sort of loose and rough because I haven't locked down the look of this character yet. Not yet. I might change my mind. I might erase the face and have it completely different. So here I'm hinting at what's called the zygomatic process. And it's pretty much sort of the top ridge of bone around the eyes. And this here is the glabella. And the glabella is like the Batman scrunch. The lines that go here, right? So I always kind of have that in my tough guys. I also noticed an interesting thing with eyes, right? And it works with cartoony eyes, right? If you just draw this little tick, this tiny little tick coming off the end of the eyes, it looks less flat, right? So typically what I did before when I was drawing eyes is I'd, draw them like this. But see how flat that looks? And the minute that I add those little tick marks in there, it just adds a little something to the eyes, right? So I really kind of enjoy doing that. It just sort of brings it to life. Now I'm going to do a small sort of forehead because my guy is sort of big and dumb, right? But I might experiment with a little bit with hairstyles, perhaps. I don't have enough screen resolution, so I might up the resolution in a second here, guys. And when I roughen a nose, all I do is like this sort of diamond shape with a line through the middle, right? And if I want to come back in and then sort of cut more shape into it, I can, But really, it's just about finding good placement for the nose. There are different nose styles too, so I haven't really firmly made a decision on what style I want to do to kind of capture that nose. So I could do something like this. I don't like that though because I'd like to have something a little bit flatter. We'll get rid of that line on the other side. Just sort of implying the nose. You might want to do this. Just imply a little bit of shading underneath there, right? And so now I'm looking at happy accidents. There's a few happy accidents here. So I got this original line here, but it looks like a lip split. So that's kind of cool. I might do that and then adjust the chin line underneath just to show that that's having an effect there. And I might come in here and grab this. Oops. What did I just do? Photoshop just went off and did its own thing. Okay, let's, what was that? Holy cow, what's going on there? And then it just brought me back way down there. Okay, crazy, strange. I meant to grab this guy, right? Nope. So I'm going to just deselect this, bring it in a little bit tighter. Yeah, the resolution's a little, it's working against me a little bit, right? So I probably want to increase the resolution, I think. I'm going to move the nose over just a little bit. What the hell is going on? Crazy. Yeah, something like that. Nothing major, right? Let me zoom out. No, I think I like the nose back where it was. Yeah, something like that. So I'm doing what's called finagling. The tear duct tick. Yes, big fan of it. Okay, so I'm doing what's called noodling a drawing, right, or finagling a drawing, and you'll get this criticism from your art director as he comes by, he watches your stuff. It's like, you're noodling your drawing, buddy, and that means going into the detail too soon, and pushing and pulling little lines around too soon, right? And it's important because then when you zoom out, you go, holy crap. That head's way too small, right? So you need to be able to kind of bomb around your drawing relatively quickly and make, massive changes. I mean, you're still in the process of roughing your drawing out, right? So you don't want to lock down too soon to a particular look, right? So here, one of the sort of key indicators to me is that because of the pose of the head, we'd actually be seeing a little bit more of the back, right? So just putting in the throat and stuff like that, and then maybe arching the neck out a little bit, and then connecting up the trapezius muscle a little bit better, right? So a couple of things I want to talk about in terms of line quality as well, down in this corner here. I don't know if you guys saw me do what I just did, right? But the original rough, it's just an arc to describe that trapezius. But as you go through each stage where you're cleaning up your drawing and developing your drawing, you got to make these little fine-tuned adjustments. And what I've done here is I've sloped that muscle naturally in to where it would join up with the deltoid and sloped it into the neck. I'm doing the same kind of thing here, right? Depending, of course, on the style. Right? And then just breaking in the clavicles a little bit more. Right? And then just hinting at the musculature. So here's an interesting tip as well for doing the deltoid muscles, right? So when you come in here and I'm connecting this up, the deltoid muscle has 3 pieces to it. The shoulder muscle, right, has a anterior deltoid, medial deltoid, posterior deltoid. So when I'm doing the shoulder, I will generally try to have one line in front of the trapezius, another line behind it, right? Because the trapezius comes and nests right where the medial deltoid is, right? So it's just a tighter way of representing your anatomy. And then that line's connecting too much. I just want to bleed it off a bit just to make it look like a natural connection. Right, and then a little bit of the muscle pinch here, right? So notice how, let me get rid of this mask line. Oh, actually, why not keep the mask line? I mean, we don't have a brief yet. We don't know what this character is. Can be interesting. But notice, the minute I draw a face in, we get a stronger sense of the personality of the character. I might actually... I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing inside of Photoshop, and I therefore think I'm making a whole bunch of weird mistakes. That layer popped out of the group. But I get a clearer sense of the character now that I've mapped the face in. Sometimes I'll do that to give myself a little bit more inspiration when designing the character. Because if I get a stronger sense, again, of the personality, then I know what that character would choose to wear for themselves, if that makes a lot of sense. Oh, I'm getting spammed, man, in the stream chat. Holy cow. What do you think, guys? Do I want to become famous? Buy followers, primes, and views? I don't know. I'll go and ban those guys later. Okay. So, at this stage, what I will generally have done is mapped out a few different kind of costume ideas and a couple of different armor ideas, right? And I'll come back. Notice how contextually it's a little bit different now that I've got a face there, right? So you kind of get a clearer understanding of that person and what they'd be wearing, right? So this is quite helpful in my design process, right? I still don't know what this character is going to be yet, so I'm going to pop back over and create another layer and then sort of continue on roughing out some ideas, right? So that's kind of all I wanted. Oh yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit on clothing. So let's say we had the assignment of, let's say we got to show this guy in his everyday clothing, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Have you guys done drapery studies? Because I've got a shorthand for drapery studies as well. That might be helpful for you guys. Oh yeah, okay, so you can't get your head around drapery studies. Drapery studies are, you draw a curtain, or, you might be in an art studio and they put a blanket over top some white cardboard boxes or whatever, and you got to draw how the drapery falls. I'll show you my little thing that I do for that. Oh, I want to be careful. I don't want to ban somebody who's genuinely put something in there. Okay, so here's what I tend to do. I look for kind of gravity, what I call gravity lines, and I draw a bunch of spaghetti loops, right? So, yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe it. I imagine like string or spaghetti draped all over the character, and I draw those. Here's how this works. I'll show you, right? So I'll come over and I'll say, let's throw in, yeah, I'm on another layer. So I might, think about how things are sort of hanging off the guy, right? And then how, maybe clothing would sort of hang off this guy. So I'm drawing all these loops, right? How would it hang? How would it fall? Right? And then I also look for lines of tension, right? So lines where the clothing is being pulled, right? So for example, I know that with a lot of sleeves, the fabric will pull this way, right? Or the fabric at the shoulder definitely pulls. You always feel it all the time. It pulls really heavily in the shoulders, right? And so you can see by just roughing in these lines, you can see just in the sketch itself, you can start to sort of visualize what the clothing might look like. If it's tucked into the shirt, I'll have it pull a little bit, right? So let's go down to the trousers, right? So with trousers, I always kind of fan out these lines like this here, because it's going to pull in the crotch area, right? So I draw those lines, and those give me my folds there. And then I pull it down the leg, right? See that? See how that works? Oh, it's doing the zoom thing again. Wait, I'll put your pen on the surface. Da-da-da. Is it zooming? It's really bizarre because it's not zooming in OBS, nor is it zooming in my preview window over here. Also, when I put the pen on. Oh, that's hugely frustrating. Let me try with a mouse instead. Same thing with a mouse. That's bizarre. Weird. That is absolutely weird. Okay, I'm going to have to go back and review and take a look at it. Okay, so... Yeah, nice. Well spotted. Well sussed. So, this is how I generally approach my first pass in clothing, right? And then, of course, I don't exaggerate it all that much. But if you start thinking about where cloth hangs and where cloth pulls, you'll be able to put in at least the rough line work to help you figure it out. I don't know why all the art classes I've been to and all the art teachers didn't just explain it to me that way. They would just throw a bunch of cloth over a bunch of tables and say, draw that. That's pretty much what my drapery studies amounted to, right? Okay. So it looks like I'm about to give this guy a toga. So I'm going to get rid of that. So try that. Practice that technique. Very, very simple, right? Couple that with, again, my very simple technique of shoulders, waist, knees being equidistant apart, and then drawing sort of gravity lines and lines of tension, and then see if that helps you out, right? You might not nail it in the first drawing, right? But you'll start to kind of get a feel for it after a while. And then, of course, there's observation, observation, observation. Just study how clothing looks on people, how it falls, right? The best thing is to draw super loose clothing to begin with, right? Because you can really exaggerate clothing folds. Yeah, and then just sort of take it from there. I'm going to leave that for the time being. So I'm going to dive in and maybe do another iteration on this character. I'm not entirely sure. Let's go back up to the face. And I think I'm going to cut the face out, put it on its own layer. And right click, and I'm going to do a layer via cut. And then that way I can bring it up just a touch. I still want exaggerated proportions, right? But just a little bit bigger, right? Okay, so there's sort of a design issue that we run into. Let me move this guy's head over just a bit. Oh, too far. Okay, so the design issue that we run into, if we take a look at the costumes, right, is that because of the angle that I chose for this guy, it blocks off his chin, right? So for a lot of initial character designs, you want, not in all cases, but when let's say when you're designing the hero character or a feature character, right? You want to be able to see their face clearly and cleanly, right? Just in the initial sort of pitch or proposal stages, you want to show off the main character, right, to a certain degree. So that's going to sort of affect a little bit my design decisions here, right? So even let's say we do want that big kind of thing here like this, right? Actually, it's not too bad. It isn't too bad. But what I might do is I might cheat it down a little bit lower, right? So that it's maybe down here. And then maybe in another development sketch, I might raise that up a bit. Okay, so let's say I'm doing this front piece, right? Let's say I've decided that that's what I want to do. We want to make this a sci-fi guy maybe, right? So now I'm pretty much redoing this design, but I'm thinking a little bit more about it. And I'll tell you what I'm thinking about as I'm doing this, right? I'm going to increase the size of my brush. So I've brought it down a bit. I've got that. And I know that I've got curvature here, right? But now I'm thinking about, well, how is it going to fit on the other side of the body? If I do it like this, that's just going to look like it's just been stuck on, right? So I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it curves a little bit more, right? So it fits in there a little bit better, right? And it's following kind of the anatomy of the guy's body a little bit closer. Now this is sort of a wobbly line. I don't think they would machine that part that way. I think it would be curved on one side and then curved on the other. So it'd be more of an S curve as it comes up here. And then I need to find that center line, right? So I'm going to maybe find that center line down this way. The curvature is a little bit off. But again, I'm not really thinking about making a good drawing yet at this point. I'm just sort of figuring out now the logistics of how this piece works and how it sort of fits in. Right? So now, we got to remember that this piece is machined, right? So they might manufacture that as a separate piece. Like they're not going to make this one continuous piece connected to a chest plate, right? So they're going to manufacture that as a separate piece and then connect it somehow, right, with the rest of the armor. Because it's so close to the guy's chin, they're going to want to make the guy feel a little bit comfortable. So they might put a little bit of padding there, right? And how that padding, they might actually take that padding and nest it in here like this, maybe, who knows, right? So I'm really, again, starting to think about how that manufacturing process would feed into how they create that piece of armor, right? I don't know about that, actually. And how that would sit. I don't think it would come to a point, right? So it's probably a softer kind of join here, right? And then I'm thinking about, okay, how are they going to put the rest of this guy's kind of armor together, right? So there's going to be a little bit of an astronaut's kind of collar, but I'm just sort of toying with maybe bringing that collar around and up a little bit. I'm in too tight. It's making it difficult to draw, actually. So something like that, maybe. And again, I'm just sort of giving you an example of how I think when I'm designing, especially if the decision is made to make a sci-fi-like character. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, they're going to make the front piece soft by putting a little bit of material there. They're probably going to do the same thing here. And then I might do something like that, just as a reminder that that's kind of softer material on the inside, right? And then there'd be a join, which this happy accident does, because that stuff has to be, I don't know, adhesively glued to the rest of the armor piece. And now I'll draw out the bulk of the armor piece. And I'll start thinking about, okay, now how are they going to machine this so that it sits comfortably over the top here? Now there's a point that I reach where I'm going to need to do a little bit of research, right? There's a point in your character designs where you always hit that moment where you're like, I got to look at some armor. I got to look at spacesuits and things like that. This back piece doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense because it's just a flat piece of cardboard that I drew back there. But it gives me a sense of what I want to try to achieve. And then I got to think of a purpose for this. And then how that might join. Now the join here is horrible, right? It's absolutely horrible. Because there's no way they'd manufacture a curved piece and then an opposite curved piece like that. So I'd want to figure out a way of designing it so it dovetails. So I do this and I think, well, maybe this needs to actually be separate from the collar piece. Maybe, right? So I'm going through and that's pretty much what I'm doing. And then I know that I'm going to have the chest piece will likely follow the same seam line. Now, how are they going to join the two plates together, right? And I'm going to use this is a motif that I use all the time. It doesn't mean that you're going to stick to it, right? Sometimes it's a good idea to use things that you've seen on other armor before or that you've used countless times in the past, just as maybe a placeholder in the design, right? But I'm starting to think, okay, well, how's this all being put together now, right? And this is going to be harder, right? And there's going to be a little bit of a level because the chest plate has to tuck under the pectoral muscles, right? So I might do this. And then at some point, that armor piece starts to come together, right? How it connects under here is unclear. It needs to be clear. I can't just leave that. It has to make total sense. It's bad design if I leave it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that follows the clavicles underneath for the time being. And it doesn't quite work with this element because this element's drawn at the wrong angle, right? So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to remove that for the time being. And we'll draw that across, right? Something like that. I might put something here. Actually, I might put something that's more like a join like this. Something like that for now. Oh, that looks too bolt-on. But I'll remove the rivets just because I like the shape. And then something there. And then maybe some vent holes in the back here. But then I'm noodling now, right? So we want to get away from that. I also want to zoom out at some point. Yeah, it's not working for me because I need to grab this guy. And I'm going to hold down Shift, and we're just going to extend this guy a little bit across. And rotate him up a little bit. Oop. Something like that, right? And so this is my sort of second pass when I'm doing design work. I'm just going through and I'm thinking about these things. In here, I know that there's going to be armor here, so there's going to be a little bit of depth to the cavity here. I know it's making his midsection look even thinner, so I don't know if I'm happy with that entirely yet. But now I got to figure out, well, how are they going to develop the armor around the rib cage and around the serrator muscles here joining up the rib cage? So, generally what I've done in the past is to just do this kind of scalloping thing, right? Where it's some layered plates, maybe. I don't know yet, again, because this is concepting, so you don't need to make any decisions just yet, right? You're just playing with shapes, but that leaves this sort of whole gap here and then here. So we'll need to figure out a solution here of how we're going to connect up that armor, right? And so I'll just leave these pieces layered for the time being. They might put like that same soft material in here just to separate the rib cage, like where it rests on the rib cage. And then I'm starting to think about what it is that the armor is going to do in through here. Now, we've got a lot of busy detail here, right? It's very, very busy. So I want to break that up with broad open swatches of nothing, right? So I'll show you what I mean. So we got this busyness here. So I might come back over to the shoulder pad. Oh, man. Oh, well. It's okay. So I might come back over here, throw another layer over top here. And then okay. So with this one, I'm just going to see what it looks like when I put in it's kind of a broad shape of nothing, right? I might extend that for the whole hand, perhaps. I just want to see what this looks like. And I'm thinking if we had, you know, of course we're going to have some kind of a belt here. And then, again, if it was just like nothing all the way down, just maybe a stripe down the side. And then we go back and do our detailing. We'll add lots of high frequency detailing here, just to help describe the boots, maybe. Something like that. So here I'm taking a step back to see if that works with the busyness through the center of the armor. It doesn't yet, because I'm thinking I'll probably need something tonal to break that up. Just trying some big old Kiss boots. And I have a suspicion, yeah, I probably want to make the boots a little bit bigger, a little bit clunkier. So I'm going to make that adjustment here. And so on and so forth. It's looking a little bit 80s though, actually. I might revisit that. I think sometimes when you dive in too close to your design, well, let's just say you got to step back every now and then and make sure your design is going in the direction you want it to. But it's cool because I haven't spent a whole load of time on it, right? But what I wanted to demonstrate is what I'm thinking of, or what I'm constantly thinking of, and why I switched to another layer, or why I moved to another rough, right? So remember, initially, when I started attacking this, I came at it from the point of view of more of a roguish barbarian type. Yeah, that looks actually kind of cool. Holy cow. That looks pretty good. I might play with that. But just to show you, I approached it from initially more of a clothing design kind of thing. Then I tried an armor design kind of thing. But I might sit here and do maybe another couple of layers where I'm looking at elvish armor, orc armor, a variety of different things. I don't know what I want for this character as of yet. So I'm going to play with a few different designs, right? Okay, any questions so far, or comments, or any thoughts at all? Okay, so I'm going to take 5 minutes and go refill on my cup of coffee, and then we'll come back and I'll talk a little bit more about anatomy. Okay, so I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Oh, I'm teaching at the minute, though.
Be right back. Be right back.
I'm gonna block a bunch of people here.
All right, Ryan goes first. Let's see if he can knock down his cups. Whoa! Good job, Ryan. All right, Kate, your turn. Whoa! Good job, Kate. Emma turn. All right, Emma. Let's see if she can do it. Whoa! Sorry, Emma. So this round, Daddy is safe. No pie, Daddy. All right, turn around. That's right. Thinking, Emma. Okay, Daddy, where's the pie?
Okay, I'm back. Yeah, that was my youngest Noah that came in. Oh, it wasn't an Irish accent. It was my youngest. He's Welsh. So, okay. Actually, before I dive into anatomy, I was downstairs and I realized I want to talk a little bit about cleanup technique as well, right? So that's part of the a man of culture. I'll talk about cleanup because it's part of the process, right? All right. So let's come in here and fix a few things that got broke. So this guy was a costume design iteration, and on the face here, yeah, let's get rid of that guy. I'm gonna pop in here. Just gonna throw another layer over top. I'm gonna bring this down. It's a good opportunity anyway, because I want to pop in here and clean up this guy's face. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to fix that resolution issue that I had. It was getting a little bit, the zoom in. Oh, man, I'm just going to check one more time. It's so bizarre because when I go to my broadcast, when I go to my channel, I'm watching the broadcast, it's not doing it for me. Is it doing it for everybody? Let's see. Okay, I'm just hitting this with the cursor just to see. No, it's not happening for me. So that's really strange. That is really strange. Zooming in and out. Okay, so I reckon it's probably a feature. I think maybe it might be. It could be some sort of feature, to help people who maybe have poor eyesight or something. Like it's an auto zoom. What was it? Windows magnifier feature, something like that. It goes full screen with mouse and pen input. All right, I'll investigate that later, guys. I'll see if I can sort that out. Never happened before today. I wonder what's different about today's setup. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on. What have I got? I've got Unreal Engine open, but that wouldn't affect it at all. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll investigate it. See if I can figure out. Are you streaming via the application itself? Through Twitch? No, I'm using Streamlabs OBS. And I'm quite new to streaming, so it could be something I've set up on my part, on my end. No, like streaming in Discord, just in Photoshop. Well, I've got to. Oh, you know what? I'm checking my Twitch stream, but is it happening for you guys in Discord? Because I'm streaming both on Discord and in Twitch. So let me just check. It could be a Discord-based setting. Show non-video. Yeah, I don't know what it might be. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to sit down and figure it out. Find out what's happening. So it's only happening in Discord, is it? I'm just setting up the image size. I'm going to go 200% because I need that resolution now. Just in Discord. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's happened to you, Julia. The streamer doesn't see it, but people watching the Discord stream will see the zooming. Well, that's cool. I'm exonerated. It's got nothing to do with me. All right. Looks okay? All right. So I'm going to pop in and do my cleanup, and I'll talk a little bit about the cleanup. Because I'm quite happy with the way the guy's face looks. So when I go to do my cleanup line, I'll go with the jet black ink line, right? So I'll talk a little bit about one of my favorite techniques for cleanup, which is thick to thin, or the calligraphic pen line. So I'll talk a little bit about that, right? So I'm going to start off with the zygomatic process here. Let me see if I've got pen pressure on here. No tool preset. Okay. Yep, that's good. Just gonna double check that it's working. Ah, yeah, that's what's bugging me. So I find that a lot of the Wacom tablet pen sensitivity properties are generally a little bit too light touch for me. I'm a pencil grinder. When I used to do my drawings as a kid, I'd like grind my pencil right through the sketch pad. I press really, really hard. So I need to reset that for a bit more of a firmer tip. Yeah, that's more my feel. Thank you. That's good. Better control over it that way. Now, a couple of different things about line control, right? Line quality. Let me go off to one side and talk a bit about line work. And I'm on the wrong layer again, yet again. You know what? I'm going to pop back out for my cleanup layer out there. Okay, so with line quality, there's a couple of things that you need to know first off. Number one, you need to have the drawing control to be able to draw straight lines. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. This idea of being able to draw a really clean, really smooth freehand line, right? So I'll discuss some techniques related to that. That's very important, not just in concept art, but when you get to digital sculpting, massively important, right? So the other thing is, when you do a thick to thin line, when you do a straight cleanup line like this, right? You can also do the thick to thin calligraphic line where you start off relatively thin and you get thicker and thicker and thicker and then thin again, right? Except really quickly, right? Something like that, right? Now there are two different ways of achieving that thick to thin, right? Single stroke, which is incredibly difficult to master, or line feathering, right? Whoops. Where you go in and you literally draw a line and then you just feather it till you get the thickness you want, right? And what we used to have when I was working in animation is we would have a cleanup guard, which was like this thin metal template with various different line grooves cut into it, and you can go in and you can just very carefully sort of erase any bumps or wobbles or anything that sort of took away from that thick to thin. And oftentimes when I did digital cleanup as well, I'd come in here with maybe a square brush just to get rid of some of those bumps and wobbles and things like that, right? The third technique I used for a little while, that was a long time ago. I wonder if I can remember. So one of the other techniques that I would do would be to go into the... Is it in here? Pen tool, right? And then so sometimes I would do my cleanup line this way. Freeform. This one. Just trying to remember how to do this. It's been a long time. Stroke subpath. And brush. Right. Something like that. But I would use the pen tool because it gave me that clean Bezier line, right? Computer interpolated, perfectly smooth curves. But that actually took a lot longer. It actually extended my cleanup time a lot longer than actually developing the digital pen control. So one of the things that I will get you guys to do once we start diving into warm-ups and things like that, probably starting not next week but the following week, is to work on your line control. I'm just realizing live now as I speak that I should probably teach you guys proper sort of drawing technique before I get into cleaning up my character, right? So let's get rid of these guys and we'll talk a little bit about drawing technique. Because I don't think I've talked to you guys about that yet. In Vancouver, in Canada, we use the term wrist in a derogatory way for inexperienced animators, right? We'd say, don't be a wrist. Well, not so much anymore, but it used to be a thing. You know, no wrists at this studio, right? So it just means an artist who is used to drawing with their wrist, right? So when you first start drawing as a kid, right? Here's what you do, right? I'm drawing a human head, and you come around this way, and you find that you got to go around the other side of the head. So you sort of contort your wrist and your body. And what's happening is you mentally start to make adjustments to compensate for your inability to draw properly, right? So what I'm talking about is you'll be there and you'll draw a curve, and then you got to come around the other way, right? And then you're twisting your wrist and you're contorting it, and you're coming up with awful, awful, awful line quality, right? If you're a wrist, don't worry about it. I was a wrist. Everyone starts off as a wrist, right? So the one thing that you need to do is not draw with your wrist. There's very little control. Surprisingly, very little control for that smooth, silky calligraphic line. So where do you want to draw from? Well, you want to pivot from your elbow. Now, I'd say this easily, and when somebody first told me this, I'm like, what? Get out. Nobody draws from their wrist. But then, I forced myself through it because I respected my animation teacher, right? So you want to draw like this, with things pivoting from the wrist. Almost, things pivoting from the elbow. So you're drawing with your forearm, and your wrist is locked. Most of the time. Not all the time. You don't have to, you can use your wrist. But disciplining yourself to get your arm involved in the drawing process is incredibly important. I wish I could show you practically. But here's the difference, right? So if I draw a straight line with my wrist, right? Here's the difference with that, and I'm using my forearm. You can see how fast I zip through it, right? The faster you go, the silkier, the smoother that line is, right? I draw with my feet. There you go. Right? So that's one thing, right? So the other thing, again, that I've demonstrated here is speed. So oftentimes when you first start drawing, you're very careful, right? So I'm going to draw a straight line as carefully as I can, right? In all honesty, I'm not trying to mess it up on purpose, right? That is the best I can do, right? Focusing on it, look at how wobbly it is. Spaghetti noodle drawing, right? Compare that with, boom, right? Boom. That's a good line. Silky smooth, thick to thin, right? That's where I want to get you guys to. Now, let's back up a step. So speed's important. Drawing with your elbow is a pivot. That's important. But let's come back to the head. How do you deal with the head, right? So you're going like this. You got to come around. Like maybe you can do like a little bit on the head this way, but then you got to come around and draw the other side of the head. There's no way you can do it without doing this, right? Well, do you ever wonder why animators' light tables have a light disc in them that you can spin around? Right? That's why. You don't contort your wrist, you turn the drawing, right? And there's a couple of different reasons for this, right? So turning the drawing not only helps facilitating drawing with your entire forearm, but there's also an optimal angle for each of you guys out there. An optimal angle. And here's what I mean. So here's my optimal angle, that sort of 45 degrees. Not bad, not bad. Starting to get difficult. Up here, difficult, really difficult, right? So what you want to do, and I don't know let me see if I can demonstrate this by holding this guy up here, right? So instead, what you want to do is you want to draw at the optimal angle, draw at the optimal angle, draw at the optimal angle, right? Always helping to facilitate the best drawing angle for your arm by spinning the canvas, right? By spinning this guy, right? So this is why animators have that rotating disc. This is why Photoshop in later iterations started to introduce the canvas rotate, right? Because the canvas rotate helps facilitate the best drawing angles, right? So one of the things that I did before I started mastering curves, right? So if I had to draw like, a human head, right? I'd sit there and I'd sort of try to hit those curves with a variety of lines, right? See what I'm doing here? I'm creating that curve, but I'm using like the optimal line for doing it, right? Something like that. Right? So I'm using that optimal angle, optimal line. Right? So that's really kind of important to consider. So number one, don't draw with your wrist, right? Draw with your forearm. That's going to take you a long time to get used to because we spend the time from, I don't know, when we're 6 till now, like almost 20 years, 15, 20 years drawing with our wrist. And I'm asking you to stop. It's not going to be an easy thing to stop. It's going to be like stopping a freight train, right? But start drawing with your forearm as much as possible. I'm still not entirely there yet, actually. I still use my wrist at points. Try to draw your line as fast as possible so you get that slick, smooth line. Try to vary the pressure on the pen so you get a nice thick to thin line. That's going to be difficult. We'll cycle back to that and I'll talk a little bit about that, right? So again, you want to be able to create that line where it's like a little bit of, ooh, that's awful. A little bit of thick to thin happening, and that control is very, very difficult to master. And I'm spending a large amount of time with the line work because this will translate when we get into ZBrush and we start doing digital sculpting, right? But I also worked with an animator who worked at Disney, and he was actually a line quality producer. And so he would literally check your cleanup artwork, and he would pick up like the most insane things, right? Like he would pick up tiny, tiny, tiny little burrs in your line, right? Like really, really tiny. Be like, no, you got to clean that up, right? And it was insane. It was insane. He was so good at picking out the tiniest little hiccup or wobble in a line, right? But that, you know, that's Disney for you. Right? So that line quality is important. Now, let's talk about, so I've talked about the technique of drawing from your forearm, and we talked about thick to thin and smooth, fast, silky lines. Now, let's talk about targeting, right? Targeting is really, really difficult, okay? So here's one of the exercises that, again, I'll run you guys through in later classes. We don't have to necessarily hit it today, right? But a simple exercise is to draw 2 dots and connect them with a nice, smooth line, right? So you ever get this? Some of you might experience this, where you're like, okay, I'm going to take my pen from this dot and I'm going to hit that dot. And it's like, okay, oh, where are you going? Wait a minute, what? Whoa, what? My hand is going totally like you have no control over it? Yeah, you can undo forever. That's totally valid, right? Right? But there's so many times, even when I'm drawing curves and I was doing my curve exercise, it'd be like, oh man, oh, my hand is going not where I want it to go, right? Now, don't worry about that. That happens to everybody. Happened to me for years, right? Until you learn that hand-eye coordination. Well, you don't learn it. You practice it until it becomes like robotic, right? So let's try and hit that line, right? So I'm going to go straight as much as possible. Whoops. But it's difficult to do. And look how wobbly the line gets when you do it slowly. It has to be fast. It has to. Otherwise you get really horrible line work, right? So what do? Well, you got to go pick that point and hit it. Whoops. Hit it. Right? That took me 3 goes to kind of get close, right? And it takes a lot of practice to do it, right? Now, what a lot of guys that I've worked with in the past do is they'll ghost the line. Ghost it, ghost it, ghost it, ghost it, hit it, right? And then that helps as well. But really, it's about being able to master this. Pick 2 points, that one, nail it. That one, nail it, right? I missed there. And you can start shorter first, and then you can try really long ones, right? It's about trying to get that line to go where you want it to go. And this simple exercise, which I was forced to do, helped me develop that hand-eye coordination where I could draw exactly what I wanted to, and I could steer the line work to exactly where I wanted it to go, right? So that's super important. What ends up happening, and this is a kind of a glimpse later on down the road, once you master that, right? Then the next one is dot here, dot here, dot here, make a curve. Oof. Which is much harder to do. The industrial designers have got this on lock. The car guys, the guys who do cars and industrial prop designs, they've totally got it on lock. Right? But being able to draw those silky smooth curves that can intersect with those 3 points, that's really hard. Right? So those are the simple exercises that you sort of need to come to grips with to develop good line quality in your drawing. And you're going to need good line quality when you do your finishing on whatever concept art you're working on, right? Any questions or comments about that? Joe brings up a good point. Remember, you've got infinite undos, right? So don't freak out about it. It's not like you have to build up line quality courage like I had to do back in the day, right? Because with the multiple undos, you just need to dive in, break the ice, and get used to it. For those of you guys who want to know a few tips and tricks about how to do it with pencil and paper, one of the things that my friend Mike and I kind of came across when we were working on Ed, Edd, and Eddy is that if you take a look at a pencil, right? If you take that pencil, put it perpendicular to your sketch pad, and then just rub really hard back and forth, what ends up happening is the tip of that pencil, right, ends up becoming like squared off, right? And when it does become squared off like this, when you draw a line, that line will naturally have a calligraphic tendency to it, right? It'll naturally have a nice thick to thin because of the shape of the tip of the pencil, right? For those of you who think you've got really good line quality now, and this is all just hash, go buy yourself a 0.05 micron pen, a 0.05 micron pen, or some sort of industrial design pen, and try and draw a straight line. Those tiny industrial designer pens, they don't hide anything. They will tell you exactly when you wobble or hiccup. Right? Try it. Get some nice art pens and give it a go. Try and do a purely pen cleanup, right? Using designer pens. They give away a lot more than a pencil does. Like, you'll really see that wobble in your line work. Okay. Any questions or comments about that? I'm still broadcasting, right? I'm still streaming to you guys, right? I hope. All right. Okay, cool. Yep. Yeah, cool. All right. So, back to this guy. Back to cleanup, right? So, I ran into pressure adjustment issues. That's cool. I was cleaning up right on the drawing. That's not cool. So that means I'm going to have to bring the opacity down even further. That's all right, though. It's okay. I like having a very low opacity just to get an impression of my original underneath it. And let's grab that base, bring that base down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to Control G this, and then we'll just go clean up. So over the past few weeks, I've taken you through, in a very compressed format, the design process that I use when doing character work. The thumbnail, right? So you're doing those little thumbnail drawings. Now, I think I stopped at the third thumbnail and blew this guy up and started doing the rough work. But generally, you do a page of like 20 little thumbnails, right? And then you'd have a conference with or a meeting with your art director and maybe the producer, and then you decide on a couple of silhouettes, then you blow it up. Then you do your rough development pass. Then you do a second tighter rough, right, which we sort of touched on today. I didn't complete the whole character with a tighter rough, but I think you get the idea. And this is the final stage, right? And that is the cleanup, right? So this is where you have to get your line work perfect. Because this is the stuff that ends up in the art of books or in the promotional material, right? So you only want your best foot forward when it comes to that sort of stuff. So I'm just sort of going through and just figuring out what I want to do in terms of cleanup. So when it comes to the glabella, right? I've hit that one line right here in the corner and then just a center line. But this line here, that's part of that nose crinkle, also will join up with the nose, right? So we got this nose line going down there. So it sort of leads into that nose line. I'm not going to be that obtuse about it. Probably just hint at it a little bit. And we'll come back here. Clean up line. I find with male eyes, it doesn't have to be so curvy. I can be a little bit more kind of little bit more rectangular with the eye shape, right? And with male eyes, I generally only just leave it at the pupil. You don't want to do the corona and all that kind of stuff, right? Especially for like the tougher characters. It gives them a little bit of that beady-eyed sense, I think. Now, the decision of thick to thin, I should actually talk a little bit about that. Because it used to confuse me when I first started doing cleanup, right? Just this understanding of what do I make thick? What do I make thin, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that. And again, with the cleanup pass, I'm using a mixture of the feathering technique and the sort of the smoother kind of brush strokes that come from my forearm. Because at the end of the day, once you master that silky smooth line, you can mix and match the techniques, right? So whatever helps you kind of achieve what it is you want to achieve, right? So let's talk a little bit about pop that in there for a sec. Let's talk a little bit about what is thick to thin. Actually, I might zoom out a little bit, right? So it's like I used to, when I was cleaning up my first sort of animation drawings, I'd wonder, okay, well, where do I put the thickness? Where do I put the thin? Well, it really sort of depends, right? Now, a lot of my first cleanup drawings, I had thick to thin that didn't make sense. And it was just this weird mix of all these calligraphic lines, and it looked more like Gothic writing than a character cleanup until I figured it out. And it was never explained to me by any other artist. I just had to sort of figure it out. So, the thick to thin, I use in 3 different scenarios, basically. And you'll sort of figure this out over time. Number 1, I use the thin part of the line to dovetail 2 body parts together, right? So, I guess for an example would be... okay, so if I were to come over here and... zoom in a little bit, and then I'm going to increase the brush size so you can see this a little bit more dramatically, right? So if I've got thick, see how I'm thinning it out as I'm trying to dovetail it in here, right? So I'll use that thin to dovetail it. This is actually a good example too. I'll also use the thick to emphasize where a body part is literally thicker, flabbier, chunkier. I'll also use the thick in areas that have dark shadow. So there's 3 main decision-making factors that I go through in terms of where I put my thick to thin. Thick lines to emphasize the thick. Yeah, pretty much. That's it. Yep, thick lines to emphasize the thick. Right? So I'm going to come here. So let's talk a little bit about the jawline, right? So here we've got the jawline nested here, right? And what's called the auditory meatus. So inside the auditory meatus is where the jawline meets and then the ear sits, right? So here is a fairly kind of thick area, and it's also darkly shadowed. So I'll start thin here, and I'll do something like that, right? Now, back when I didn't know where to put thick or thin, I would just be like, well, one of the impressions I had was it's got to start thin, it's got to go thick, and then it's got to end thin, right? So this would be maybe one of my earlier kind of cleanup attempts using thick to thin, right? And then I go in and erase it. But design-wise, it doesn't make as much sense. It's a sloppy line anyway. But design-wise, it doesn't make as much sense as just coming in here. Oops. Like that, right? So that feels a little bit more like it's faking volume, it's faking shadow, right? And I'm also changing line direction, so it dovetails nicely with this one, right? And then, you know, obviously I'm trying to do like a smooth, silky line, and I missed. So sometimes I'll just connect it up by feathering it, and then coming in there and erasing the adjoining overlap, right? But when I'm knee deep in the thick of cleanup, I always try to kind of challenge myself and say, oh, I'm going to nail it. I'm going to clean it up so it looks like one continuous line. So I have fun with it, and at the same time, it improves my cleanup line quality, right? So here we got a difficult situation, right? Because I'm going up this way, and it's an awkward angle, right? So I'm going to take the old Wacom tablet, turn it over to the side like this, so I got a better angle on that. Although I don't have my proper drawing table in front of me, so it's kind of a bit weird. But there you go. Right. So here I'm making sure that the thickness emphasizes the cheek, right? Here's what I'm talking about the Disney guy's line quality observations, right? And I can see them now because I've worked with him. Oh, I forget his name though. It was Tom or Tim. It was so many years ago, right? So he would pick at this right here, right? And here, it thins out too much. So I need to. It thins out too abruptly, right? So I need to even that out a little bit. And that's how picky the Disney guys are. Here, I might maintain that thickness a little bit as it would come down here, and then I'd thin it out, right, as it gets to where the eyes are, because I know it's suddenly going to get thick again as we come up to the brow, right? And I've got a happy accident here. I've accidentally undershot it, but that's okay. I can dovetail it, right? So I can bring this guy out, and I might go graphic with that, as in just make the line simpler, less curvy, right? So that's cool. See how that little dovetailing line kind of adds a little bit more of a sense of 3D volume to the character a little bit? So when you're doing cleanup, you never stop thinking as an artist, right? You never stop thinking about how can I improve how this character looks, you know, and the impression this character is giving, right? So here I'm just rotating my Cintiq so I can get better angles. Lost it a little bit there, right? I'm sitting at kind of an awkward desk as well, so it's not the best. There we go. I don't know if you guys have seen my earlier broadcasts on my Twitch stream, but there's a caricature of Phoenix that I do. And that Phoenix cleanup that I do, because I'm not consciously aware that I'm talking to a whole bunch of people, I'm just in my own headspace, you'll see better technique there, right? Obviously, we draw better when we think nobody's watching, right? So you might want to have a look at that. That would be on my YouTube channel, not on the Twitch stream, because it was deleted a long time ago. But you can see my approach to the Phoenix character on that one, right? So I'm going a little bit thicker towards the back of the head, right? A little bit thicker on the top of the head. Now the top of the head, I went thick, not for any reason, really. It just looks a bit nicer. I might change my mind and go back and say, like, towards the top of the head, maybe the lines thin out. Perhaps because I'm planning on putting some light there, a light gleam off the top of the head, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. And so on and so forth. I have to be careful that I'm not mentally cleaning up because the rough drawing is underneath. What I mean by that is that there needs to be a connecting line here on the eye, even if it's just a hint at one. I might be ignoring it because I can see faintly underneath my original rough. So I might just put a little bit of a dovetail in there. Just a little bit. A little bit of a dovetail in there. Now with battle hardened guys, right? I've noticed that you can get away with putting a few extra lines underneath. It just sort of makes sense for their character. And something I've just started adopting lately with eyes is trying to put a little bit of a hint of an eyelid. Just a little bit, right? Now you got to be careful with that because if it's too strong or if it's too noticeable, your character looks tired or old, right? So you got to be like super, super subtle with it. Just need a hint of it, really. This line's a bit too thin, right? So I might, I don't know if I want to draw the base of the nose, but I'm going to sketch it in there and see if I like it. I did want to give this guy a relatively long nose. I think I'm going super cartoony with the nose. I'm not going to, I've made the decision, I think, not to do the nostrils. Not yet, anyway, right? And I don't know if I want a tick there or not. So I'm just going to add it in just to see how that looks. It's not too bad. And then I'll add a little bit of a lip to my guy. He was supposed to be kind of a little grim face, but I'm just, as I'm cleaning him up, I'm evolving him into saying something. Right? So maybe he's saying a line of dialogue. And then because I've opened the mouth up a little bit, I'm also extending the lower lip so it doesn't quite cleanly connect, right? I don't want to draw a triangle there. I want to draw a lip, so I'm drawing that lip. And then, because of that, I'll need to put a little bit of a bend in here, right? I went and drew over that a few different times because I'm trying to get I'm trying to see if a dovetail works on here. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to come in here. I want to maybe do that, right? So there's a bit of a split. Right? Now I have to make a decision of whether or not that is the lower lip or if I want to add a chin to that, right? But if I add a chin, it just might be a little bit too much in that area. Yeah, it's a bit too much. Right? I'll leave it at that, right? And then I'm going to draw the ear, even though I'm planning on covering it with his costume a little bit later. Oh yeah, so the curvature that I deal with the ear, right? So I used to do just a semicircle for the ear, right? But now I've got one curve that comes up to the top of the ear, almost Spock-like, but it's easier to draw and you can always round it out later. And then this curve, and then I reverse the curve sort of little more than halfway down to go the other way, and then I reverse the curve again, right? So see how that works? So it gives it more of that ear shape, right? And then the inside of the ear, easy, just the main line here. Woo! All right. And then another line here, right? And then just this. There you go. Ear. Job done, right?
Sorry.
Yep, that's okay. There you go. That's good enough for now, right? I might go and develop it a little bit later. But I'm happy with that, right? There's something missing here. I think I want to go a little bit darker with this. Just because I don't think this guy is necessarily clean cut, right? And actually, I might choke up on this a little bit, just a little bit, and then add a couple of nose crinkles there, right? So that's it. So I go through the entire kind of drawing, working it that way, right? So let's save that off for today. Hey, buddy. How's it going? Dun, dun, dun. All right. Yeah, I got you guys till 12, right? So we're 10 past 12. So that, in a super, super tight nutshell, is my entire process, right? So generally, I would take... No, it's been such a long time. I'm trying to remember this now. So the thumbnail process, maybe two days. I think by the second day, I'm already into roughing, right? And then, so the rough development sketches, taking into account the back and forth with approvals and changes and notes and things like that. I usually stay at the rough stage for a good week, right? Good week or so. Cleanup, a day. You know, but I've gotten fairly quick with cleanup. So cleanup usually takes me about a day to do. And then tonal pass, another day. And then the final painting pass, usually 2 days, 2-3 days. So a couple of weeks to do a character design, right? From start to finish. 2 to 3 weeks, around there, right? So that's kind of the time frame that you guys would probably be wanting to gun for. All right. So any questions about that? Any thoughts, comments, or concerns? Yeah, everyone good? Yeah, it's cool. I wasn't expecting to nail the personality of my guy so quickly, but I'm really happy. I'm really, really happy with where this character ended up. So it's going to be fun to kind of build out his costume. I know I exaggerated the height and size of the head, but I might tweak it again. I might mess around with the scale. The YouTube channel. Let me just pop there super quick. I want to make sure that that video is up and running. Da, da, da. Okay. Oops. Okay. So my channel. All right. So here's a link to my channel. Da, da, da. In there. I'll also pop it in the Twitch chat. And let's see. Those are those guys. Boy, there's a lot of stuff in here. Oh yeah. So there's the character cleanup. So I will be returning. Oops, 1 second. I just realized I'm not on the right channel. I'll move this over. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, we might as well look at this just a little bit, right? So there's that character, and I'm in the middle of the cleanup pass. I haven't done a tonal pass or a painting pass yet, but I'm planning on doing that. So this was completed over the summer. So that's my take on the Phoenix. But everything I talked about in that video is exactly what I talked to you about today in terms of my thumbnailing, roughing, cleanup. I really had loads of fun cleaning her up. And I thought I caught her personality quite well. You'll see that same process as well. When I finish with one of the development rough passes, I dive into the face straight away, right? Because when I nail the face, then the rest of the character kind of comes to life for me, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable to do the final pass on that character. I'll talk about decisions I made for the sash, the hip tilt, the pelvis tilt, the pose, all kinds of different stuff. So, yeah, so if you want to see that, that's also available as well. But if you don't want to bother watching that, I pretty much covered everything today that I talk about in that video, right? So that's it. Thank you for subbing to my channel. That's cool. Cheers for that. And every time a video gets popped up on YouTube, it's just the Twitch stream. I'm just multi-streaming to the YouTube channel at the same time. So it's the same content. So you can either tune in on Twitch or YouTube. It doesn't matter. Until I have the time to be able to sit down and edit these videos properly, which I never have time for, I can make a proper YouTube channel that can cut out a lot of the guff of the general discussion and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, for everybody as well. If Twitch plays up for you or anybody else, it does end up going to YouTube. That doesn't negate the fact that if I'm dropping frames on my streaming utility, it's going to affect the quality of the YouTube video, obviously. But if that happens, just let me know. It's been good so far. It's only the last couple of days where it's been really, really bad, right? So there you go. Another resource for you guys. There's quite a few there that you can take a look at. But again, it's not like your typical tutorial, right? It's not cleaned up. It's not like, here's chapter 1, here's how you do it. You know, I'm basically streaming live and walking you guys through my process live. The one difference that I have in my streams versus any other tutorial streams that you might find on YouTube is that I talk about every little decision, right? So you ever watch those drawing tutorials where you're like, well, why did you change that line? And you drew that line instead of that line. But the artist is just going, right? And never stops to tell you that decision-making process. So I try to kind of walk you through all those micro thought changes so that if you want, you're aware of, at sort of a micro level, what the process is and some of the decisions that I'm making, right? The other thing that I'm always puzzled about is whether or not the artist giving a YouTube tutorial has a reference screen up on a second monitor beside them. Because it makes a huge difference if they've got a reference monitor that they're drawing from, right? Because oftentimes I'll think to myself, what is your end goal? Like, what is the end thing that you're trying to achieve, right? So, for example, with the Phoenix, I do show some of my references and show you exactly where I'm going. This barbarian type character, I don't show any reference because I'm sort of making it up on the spot. But that doesn't mean that that is a valid technique. I can only make it up on the spot because I've drawn thousands of characters like him in the past. So I'm drawing on this mental library of previous visual weapons I've pulled in the past, and then just throwing it at this character. But I have gotten to the point where I need to look at reference now. I need to look at armor reference. I need to look at costume reference, right? I need to figure out what it is he's freaking holding, right? So there's all those decisions that I need to make. And so I'll talk a little bit about how to use reference material in next week's session. And then I wanted to talk about anatomy today. Unfortunately, didn't get around to it. But next class, we'll be starting in on exercises, right? So we'll be looking at life drawing, we'll be looking at line quality, and we'll be looking how to incorporate reference material, right? So that's all for next week. Okay? So I'll leave it at that for today. Any final thoughts? Nope. Okay, cool. Cool, thank you. Thank you. Cheers, guys. Yeah, I hope you got a lot out of it, right? And yeah, next class we'll be diving into exercises, right? And taking you through some practical exercises to kind of get you guys trained up. Trained up. I feel like it's like a military boot camp of some kind. Okay, cool guys. I'll talk to you guys later. All right. So, and we'll leave you guys. I guess now is a really good time for me to take off on this barbarian dude and just draw what I want on this character. I suppose I'll stream the rest of the process. But the basics are there anyway. So I've covered that. We will keep working on this drawing in terms of a tonal pass and then a color pass, and then we'll take it from there. So stick with me on this journey, and I'll talk to you guys later.